In this video, we're going to be discussing the Toronto Maple Leafs. They lost another game in overtime, and in his post-game interview, goalie Frederick Andersen called out the team. I want to discuss his remarks and how the team moves forward from here, and that's coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. On this channel, we review and discuss all 31 NHL teams with an unbiased opinion. So if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So let's discuss the Toronto Maple Leafs. Obviously, as of late, things have not gone well for the Leafs. They haven't had very many regulation wins, and we've seen them blow some leads and lose some games in overtime. So after the game last night, listening to goaltender Frederick Andersen's post-game interview, was a little bit surprising in some of his remarks. I'm not surprised in how he felt, but I'm a little bit surprised that he shared some of these comments publicly. So let's take a look at the interview quotes, and we'll discuss from there what we think and how they should move forward. So here's some of the comments from Frederick Andersen's post-game interview. He says, "We've got to regroup. We've got to figure out who wants to commit to playing for this team. We've got to have a different attitude. We have to find a way to keep the foot on the gas the whole game. We can't be satisfied at 2-0. I think it's a lack of effort at certain points. It certainly can happen. We've got to figure this out if we want to play any meaningful hockey later on this season." So, I mean, I'm not surprised that he's frustrated. He probably feels like he's being hung out to dry. If you look at some of the goals that they allowed, especially not only in last night's game, but in some of their more recent games, especially in some of the overtimes, it looks like, you know, obviously defense is an area of focus for the Leafs. You know, they do have a lot of offensive weapons, even though that they have struggled with scoring more than you would think lately, considering the offensive firepower that they have. Early in the season, they were scoring in huge bunches. Scoring was not an issue at all, and it was more of the defensive game. But if they get into a run and gun type of deal where they could, you could bank on them scoring 5, 6, 7 goals. So even if they allowed 3 or 4, they could still more often than not pull out the W. Well, now that they're not scoring as much, the defensive woes are still there. Frederick Andersen has played pretty good, but he's being hung out to dry way too often, and it's just not getting it done anymore because they're not putting up the big offensive numbers to offset their defensive woes. If you look at the overtime winner last night, they had Jake Gardiner and William Nylander coming back. Jake Gardner's a defenseman. They both took the same guy and left the goal scorer wide open. Obviously, total mind lapse there on Nylander's part, but really Gardner's got to be the guy coming back to kind of shows, he's going to be like the boss or the guy in charge and directs the traffic here, and that didn't happen. Obviously, they could use some help on that blue line. We've discussed it on this channel before a number of times that the Maple Leafs want to be serious about making any kind of playoff run this year. Defense has to come first. They have to play better defensively, and they need some help on that blue line. Now, obviously, they do have lots of firepower up front. I know Babcock's trying to play a lot of a fairly defensive-minded system, and maybe that's slowing them down from the offensive side. But at the same time, offensives typically go in struggles at times anyways. So if you take a look at the Maple Leafs blue line, they certainly could use some help back there. They have a lot of guys that are offensive-minded, but defensively, they don't really have a lot of stay-at-home guys who can really be reliable for shutting players down. Now, when it comes to overtime, especially when there's lots of room on the ice, you got Morgan Rielly, Jake Gardiner, like they are pretty decent offensive-minded defensemen, but their defensive game certainly leaves a lot to be desired, and they quite often get caught, and which has been leading to some of these overtime goals. Like if you look, Rielly and Gardiner have both been the GOAT on many occasions where they've been the one at fault. But if you look, let's go back to Andersen's comments here, talking about a lack of effort and who wants to be committed to this team. It certainly seems like there might be hitting a boiling point here. And there might be a little bit of a divide in that dressing room. From a Leafs perspective, if you're a Leaf fan, leave me some comments down below. Do you think that they're coming to a point where there seems to be a divide and a question of effort within that dressing room? I mean, is there a case here where the team might be slowly imploding from within? I mean, I'm not totally convinced that's the case. Sometimes player comments can be taken out of context, especially after a loss. They're frustrated. I get all that. But it makes you wonder for Andersen to come out and speak publicly like he did, how long this has kind of been brewing before the comments were let go here. So what do you think the Leafs need to do? I mean, in my opinion, they need some help on that blue line. It's just first and foremost. And if you look at, there's been a lot of backlash against Mike Babcock lately too. I mean, I know there's still a lot of Leaf fans that are quite fond of Babcock. He's still a great coach, but I know I've seen a lot of comments online, people questioning his use of players and whatnot. And, you know, for the most part, you can always poke questions at it, but at the end of the day, the players need to perform. You know, when you see guys like Connor Brown getting an opportunity, he's making the most of it. I don't question his use of Brown at all. I do kind of wonder sometimes. I mean, Leo Komarov is one of the top minute munchers for forwards. And, you know, certainly got to question his use of Komarov. Roman Polak on the back end, too, certainly gets way more playing time than I think he deserves, even being in the lineup alone. So, you know, there's certainly some question marks, but overall I think Babcock is not the issue, it's the guys on the ice. So with Frederick Andersen's comments here, I think what I want to know from Leaf fans is who is he directing these at? I mean, you, as a Leaf fan, I'm sure you probably feel like you know your team better than anyone. Who is the least, putting out the least amount of effort? It seems like the most speculation I could see is kind of garnered at that Bozak line between Bozak, JVR, and Marner. I mean, they've all had their struggles up and down this year. So it makes me wonder if that's who he's kind of talking about. Obviously, they're not only their defensive woes as well. In that game last night, we saw Mitch Marner get his pocket picked by Nolan Patrick, created a turnover, and the puck went straight in. So I'm sure that's not something that they want to have happen, and obviously that's frustrating as well. But I think this really emphasizes the point that the Toronto Maple Leafs need help on the defensive side of the game. And if they don't get it, I'm not convinced they can be a very strong playoff team. Right now, I think they're lucky that they're in the Atlantic Division. They're sitting pretty comfortable in third place. They certainly don't need to panic about making the playoffs at this point. I think things would have to get a lot worse before it ever gets to that. But if they were in any other division, I think they'd be considered a lot more mediocre, and they'd probably be battling a lot harder for a playoff spot. So I know a lot of people think the Leafs are a strong contender. I think they are a good team. If you look a couple of years ago, they've come a long ways, but they certainly have a fair bit of work to do, in my opinion, before they can really be considered a true contender. And defense is where it all starts. They have a good goaltender. They have a fair bit of forwards that can score, even though they're not scoring a lot lately. It's just a slump. I think they have the tools to snap out of that slump. Obviously, it probably couldn't hurt to make some changes within personnel. I mean, I know there's been frustration that Kadri's getting a lot of first power play minutes when he's in a major slump, when you don't even see guys like Austin Matthews on a power play as much as you would like. So, as a Leaf fan, I want to hear from you. What do you think the Leafs need to snap out of this? And who do you think Andersen's comments were mostly directed at? Don't forget to follow us on social media. You'll see our Twitter handle right here. We're also on Facebook and on Instagram. All of our social media links are in the description below, so please check us out there. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. We'll catch you next time.